300 hours, northern coastline, Orchid Island. A tropical storm batters the jagged volcanic rock formations. Rain sheets down in aggressive diagonal torrents that obscure the horizon. U.S. Rangers huddle in shallow, waterlogged observation posts dug into the black sand. The roar of the Pacific Ocean slamming against the basalt cliffs drowns out all ambient noise. Lightning flashes, illuminating the churning whitecaps for a split second before total darkness returns. Water drips steadily off the brim of Kevlar helmets. A ranger sergeant wipes mud from the lens of his thermal binoculars. He scans the chaotic waterline. The green phosphor screen flickers with the interference of the storm. Something disrupts the pattern of the waves. It is not natural. 3 distinct heat signatures bob just above the surface of the freezing water. They move with purpose, cutting against the current. The sergeant freezes. He taps the shoulder of the machine gunner next to him. The gunner racks the charging handle of his light machine gun. The metallic clack is lost in the thunder. Black shapes rise from the foam. They are large, human silhouettes clad in slick wetsuits and rebreathers. They drag waterproof equipment cases onto the jagged rocks. The sergeant squeezes his trigger. His assault rifle bucks against his shoulder. A muzzle flash rips through the rain. One of the figures jerks violently backward, water spraying from his chest. He collapses into the surf. The ocean foam turns dark. The silence shatters. The remaining intruders react instantly, diving behind the volcanic boulders. Red tracer rounds zip from their position, cracking past the Ranger dugout. Bullets chew up the sandbags on the perimeter. Wet dirt and pulverized rock spray into the Rangers' faces. A grenade sails through the air. It lands with a heavy, wet thud in the mud just outside the foxhole. "Grenade!" a corporal screams. The squad scrambles, diving flat against the muddy floor of the pit. The explosion heaves the earth upward. A shockwave punches the air from their lungs. Mud, shrapnel, and boiling steam shower the position. The sergeant shakes off the debris and rises. He looks back at the ocean as another bolt of lightning splits the sky. The sea is crawling. Dozens of rubber raiding craft crest the waves behind the initial frogmen. Motors roar to life, cutting through the sound of the storm. This is not a probe, it is an invasion. The sergeant grabs the radio handset and screams into the mic, calling for immediate reinforcement. A red signal flare shoots into the sky, burning a brilliant, bloody hole in the storm clouds. 3:15 hours, beach sector Alpha, Orchid Island. The red distress flare hisses as it sinks into the wet sand, casting long, erratic shadows across the beach. The storm rages with renewed violence. Rain lashes the ground in blinding sheets, turning the black volcanic dust into a thick, sucking mud. The ocean churns aggressively. Amidst the crashing waves, dozens of rubber raiding craft slam onto the shore. Engines cut. Boots splash into the shallow surf. The first wave of the invasion force sprints toward the dunes, weapons raised. A heavy machine gun erupts from the Ranger bunker on the ridge. A stream of orange tracer fire tears into the lead group. The heavy rounds rip through flesh and rubber alike. One raiding craft explodes as bullets pierce its fuel tank. A fireball rolls upward, illuminating the terrified faces of the men in the water. Debris rains down. Wood splinters, shredded rubber, and burning fuel scatter across the tide line. The attacking Marines drop flat. They crawl rapidly through the sand, returning fire with disciplined precision. Green tracers crisscross the air, snapping past the Ranger positions. The concrete lip of the observation post disintegrates under the concentrated barrage. Stone chips spray into the eyes of the defenders. A Ranger corporal peeks over the rim and fires a burst from his assault rifle. A bullet strikes his helmet, snapping his head back violently. He crumbles to the muddy floor. A medic grabs his vest and drags him into the defilade. Blood smears the wet rock. Below, a team of attackers rushes the flank. They move fast, using the thunder to mask their approach. An enemy soldier kneels and shoulders a rocket launcher. The projectile shrieks across the gap. It impacts the sandbags protecting the machine gun nest. The explosion blasts the gunner backward. Sandbags rupture, burying the weapon. The Ranger lieutenant sees the breach. He screams into his headset, ordering the perimeter defenses detonated. He grabs the firing device for the claymore mines. He squeezes the clacker. 100 yards of beach erupts instantly. Thousands of steel ball bearings shred the vegetation in the air. The attacking squad vanishes in a cloud of smoke and pulverized sand. The beach falls momentarily silent, save for the moans of the wounded. But the reprieve is short. Through the smoke, a deep, mechanical hum vibrates the ground. The sea behind the wreckage is moving again. Larger shadows loom in the mist. 3:45 hours, beach sector Alpha, Orchid Island. The battle rhythm shifts. The erratic pop of small arms fire is drowned out by a deafening low-frequency roar. It sounds like a jet engine on the surface of the water. The vibration shakes the teeth of the Rangers entrenched on the ridge. Through the driving rain and smoke, massive shapes emerge from the ocean mist. They are colossal. 3 giant hovercrafts drift sideways over the surf, their massive rubber skirts kicking up walls of sea spray and wet sand. The lead hovercraft surges forward. It ignores the shoreline, powering straight up the gentle slope of the beach. Its turbine engines scream. The vessel crushes the wooden debris and barbed wire obstacles like matchsticks. A rotary cannon mounted on the port side spins up. A distinct buzz saws through the air. A continuous beam of fire lashes out from the craft. The rounds impact the Ranger ridgeline with terrifying velocity. Rocks shatter into dust, sandbags disintegrate. The earth along the trench line erupts in a straight line of destruction. "Get down!" the sergeant bellows, shoving a private into the mud. The suppression fire shreds the vegetation above their heads. Trees shear in half, toppling onto the defensive positions. The hovercraft slews to a halt 50 yards inland. The air cushion deflates with a massive hiss. The armored bow ramp drops with a heavy metallic clang. A mechanized roar echoes from inside the steel belly of the ship. Smoke pours from the hold. The first squad of heavy infantry charges down the ramp, shields locked. They fan out instantly, establishing a firing line. Behind them, the dark outline of a vehicle engine revs. A Ranger specialist on the far flank shoulders an anti-tank rocket. He aims for the hovering beast. He fires. The rocket streaks through the rain. It strikes the side of the hovercraft's skirt. The explosion rips a hole in the rubber, black smoke billows, but the metal hull remains intact. The rotary cannon swivels toward the smoke trail. It fires. The Ranger's position disappears in a violent cloud of earth and fire. The beachhead is secured. The invasion force pours onto the island. 4:15 hours, beach sector Alpha. The storm rages, mixing rain with the thick, oily smoke of burning rubber. The ground vibrates rhythmically. Inside the hollow belly of the beached hovercraft, engines rev to a screaming pitch. The steel ramp groans under immense weight. The Rangers on the ridge brace themselves against the wet earth. An amphibious assault vehicle lurches out of the darkness. It slams onto the wet sand with a heavy splash. Its wide tracks churn the beach, throwing up massive rooster tails of black mud. The turret rotates with a sharp mechanical whine. The main cannon levels at the tree line. A second vehicle follows immediately, then a third. They form a wedge, crushing the driftwood and rock obstacles beneath their treads. "Armor!" a Ranger shouts. He signals to the heavy weapons team. 2 Rangers pop up from a concealed spider hole on the flank. One shoulders a disposable anti-tank launcher. He aims, he fires. The rocket shrieks across the gap, trailing a distinct plume of gray smoke. It impacts the lead vehicle's track. The explosion flashes white-hot. Metal shears against metal. The track snaps with a loud crack like a whip. The vehicle slews violently to the right, digging a deep trench in the sand before grinding to a halt. The hatch flies open, smoke billows from the interior, but the turret is still active. It swings toward the launch site. The cannon fires. The percussion thumps the chest of every soldier on the beach. The spider hole erupts in a geyser of dirt and body parts. The Rangers are gone. The remaining armored vehicles accelerate. They bypass their disabled wingman. They do not stop. They roll directly over the shallow foxholes of the forward perimeter. The sound of steel tracks crushing bone and Kevlar is lost under the roar of diesel engines. The Ranger captain slams his fist against the dirt wall of his command post. He keys his radio handset. He orders the platoon to blow the claymores and fall back to the secondary line. He knows the beach is lost. 500 hours, jungle perimeter, Orchid Island. The dense tropical canopy traps the humidity, creating a suffocating layer of mist and heat. Rain drips heavily from broad leaves, turning the jungle floor into a slick slurry of mud and rotting vegetation. U.S. Rangers scramble up the steep volcanic slope, boots slipping on wet roots. The roar of the ocean is muffled here, replaced by the terrifying sound of snapping timber behind them. Breath comes in ragged, desperate gasps. A high-pitched whistle pierces the air. It descends rapidly, screaming toward the retreating column. A Ranger sergeant tackles his radio man into the hollow of a massive root system. The ground erupts. The mortar round strikes a teak tree 10 feet up. The trunk shatters. Razor-sharp wood splinters and hot steel shrapnel spray downward like a shotgun blast. The concussion knocks 3 soldiers off their feet. Dirt and pulverized bark fill the air. A Ranger screams, clutching a thigh that is now a ruin of torn fabric and blood. A medic slides through the mud, grabbing the wounded man's drag handle. He heaves him behind the cover of a fallen log. "Suppressing fire!" the lieutenant roars. The rear guard spins around. They level their assault rifles. Muzzle flashes strobe in the gloom. They dump magazines into the foliage below. Branches shred. Leaves disintegrate. Enemy shadows dart between the trees at the bottom of the hill. Green tracers zip back up the slope, cracking loudly past the ranger's ears. A bullet strikes a canteen, exploding it in a splash of plastic and water. The enemy volume of fire increases. A machine gun opens up from the tree line below, chewing through the vegetation, protecting the Americans. The bark of the trees explodes into dust. "Pop smoke!" the sergeant yells. Two rangers pull pins and hurl canisters down the slope. They bounce off rocks and settle in the brush. Thick, white chemical smoke hisses out instantly. It expands rapidly, creating an opaque wall between the hunters and the prey. "Break contact! Move! Move!" The squad abandons the position. They sprint up the trail, lungs burning. Behind them, the white smoke swirls violently as enemy rounds punch blindly through the cloud. The mortar explosions walk up the hill, chasing them, churning the earth into craters. 6:30 hours, deep jungle, Orchid Island. Pale gray light filters through the dense triple canopy. The heavy storm has passed, leaving behind a dripping, suffocating silence. Mist rises from the warm, rotting vegetation on the jungle floor, creating shifting ghosts in the humidity. The air smells of wet earth and ozone. Rangers lie motionless in shallow depressions, buried under layers of ferns and mud. Their faces are smeared with green and black grease. They do not breathe, they do not blink. They are part of the terrain. A twig snaps. The sound cracks like a pistol shot in the quiet. A boot squelches into the mud. A Chinese point man emerges from the mist. He moves slowly, his weapon raised, scanning the high branches. He steps over a thick root. He does not see the thin fishing line tripwire hovering inches above the dirt. Two more soldiers materialize behind him. They whisper softly, signaling the squad behind them to advance. The point man takes another step. His boot catches the wire. The ranger lieutenant squeezes the detonator. A directional mine strapped to a mahogany tree explodes. A cone of 700 steel ball bearings shreds the air. The blast wave vaporizes the vegetation in the kill zone. The three lead scouts disintegrate in a pink mist of blood and fabric. The jungle erupts. "Contact front!" a voice screams in Mandarin. The rangers rise from the mud like reanimated corpses. They open fire at point-blank range. Muzzle flashes light up the gloom. Assault rifles chatter violently. The Chinese main element, caught in the open, dives for cover behind the buttress roots of giant trees. Bullets chew through the wood, sending splinters flying into faces. A Chinese Marine charges through the smoke, bayonet fixed. He leaps over a fallen log, landing directly on top of a ranger gunner. The two men crash into the mud. The ranger's rifle is knocked away. He draws a combat knife. The Marine thrusts the bayonet. The ranger parries with his forearm, metal screeching against bone. He drives the knife upward. It sinks into the attacker's neck. Arterial blood sprays across the ranger's safety glasses. The Marine collapses, gurgling. The firefight dissolves into a brutal brawl. There are no lines. It is chaos. A grenade bounces off a tree trunk and lands in a puddle. It detonates, sending a geyser of muddy water and shrapnel into the air. Men scream. Rifles jam with mud. Soldiers swing gun stocks like clubs, smashing visors and teeth. The Rangers hold the line, but the weight of numbers pushes against them. The jungle floor is slick with red. 7:15 hours, Highland Ridge, Orchid Island. The sun burns off the morning mist, revealing the emerald expanse of the upper jungle. The air is thick with the acrid smell of burnt cordite and wet pine. The infantry firefight below has faded to sporadic, distant pops. A new sound begins to vibrate the water droplets on the leaves. It starts as a low thrum and builds rapidly into a chest-pounding rhythmic chop. Two attack helicopters surge over the volcanic peak. They bank hard, their noses dipping aggressively toward the ranger positions on the slope. Sunlight glints off their black canopies. The stub wings on the lead aircraft flash. "Air!" a ranger screams. A salvo of unguided rockets streaks from the pods. They tear through the canopy with a terrifying shriek. The jungle floor explodes. Chains of detonations rip along the trail, vaporizing ferns and blasting craters into the mud. Trees shear in half, toppling in slow motion. A ranger crouching behind a rock is lifted bodily by the concussion and thrown 10 feet into a ravine. Debris rains down, dirt, hot jagged steel, and burning wood. The second helicopter drifts sideways, its chin-mounted cannon swiveling. The gun roars. A stream of 30mm explosive rounds stitches a line across the clearing. The shells impact with the force of grenades. A large oak tree disintegrates, showering a squad with deadly splinters. A ranger heavy weapons specialist slides into a crater. He coughs blood. He drags a portable air defense missile tube onto his shoulder. He rips the safety cover off. He tracks the lead chopper through the smoke. The seeker head whines, the tone locks solid. He pulls the trigger. The missile ejects with a thwump, then the rocket motor ignites. A trail of white smoke corkscrews upward. The helicopter pilot spots the launch. He banks violently, dumping burning magnesium flares. The bright decoys hang in the air. The missile ignores them. It slams into the helicopter's tail boom. The explosion severs the tail rotor. The aircraft shudders violently. It begins a sickening, uncontrollable spin. The engine screams as the transmission fails. The machine plummets. It crashes through the canopy, branches snapping like gunfire. It impacts the canyon floor with a seismic crunch. A massive fireball rolls up through the trees, scorching the sky. Wait 30 hours. Coastal settlement, Orchid Island. The sun climbs higher, baking the corrugated tin roofs of the abandoned fishing shacks. The village is a ghost town of narrow, dusty alleys and wooden structures perched on stilts above the mud. Laundry still hangs on lines, stiff and dry in the heat. A stray dog limps across the central dirt road, ribs showing. The silence is heavy, unnerving, broken only by the distant crackle of burning vegetation on the ridge above. A ranger corporal presses his back against the peeling blue paint of a storefront. He wipes sweat from his eyes. He signals hold with a clenched fist. He hears it. The distinct crunch of broken glass in the building directly opposite. A shadow moves behind a dirty window pane. The front door of the general store explodes inward. A boot kicks it off its hinges. A Chinese fire team surges into the street, weapons raised. The ranger corporal pivots around the corner. His shotgun booms. The heavy report echoes off the metal roofs. The lead attacker catches the spread of buckshot in his chest plate. The impact lifts him off his feet. He flies backward, knocking down the man behind him. The alley erupts in crossfire. Bullets punch through the thin wooden walls of the houses like paper. Splinters and drywall dust explode into the air, choking the combatants. A ranger kicks a side door open. He pulls the pin on a flashbang and tosses it inside. Bang! A blinding white flash blows out the windows. He rushes the room. 3 enemy soldiers stumble, hands over their eyes. He engages them with his pistol. Pop, 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 they drop to the floor. Outside, a Chinese heavy machine gun sets up on a flat rooftop. The gunner opens fire. The large caliber rounds tear apart the flimsy cover of the ranger squad. Wood disintegrates. Tin sheets rip away, clattering onto the street. RPG! A ranger screams. A rocket-propelled grenade streaks down the main street, trailing gray smoke. It slams into the base of the ranger-occupied house. The explosion shears the support stilts. The entire structure groans and collapses in a heap of timber and twisted metal. A massive cloud of dust engulfs the street. Survivors crawl from the wreckage, coughing gray powder, weapons lost in the debris. The village is burning. 145 hours, Main Street coastal settlement. The perimeter has collapsed. The air is solid with dust and the snap of supersonic bullets. Rangers huddle in a shallow irrigation ditch on the southern edge of the village. They are outflanked. To the north, the wreckage of the general store burns fiercely. Through the flames, wave after wave of Chinese infantry surges forward. They vault over the debris, bayonets flashing in the firelight. They are 30 meters away, then 20. The ranger captain crouches in the mud. Blood runs from a shrapnel cut on his forehead, blinding his left eye. He grabs the radio handset. He keys the mic. He screams the coordinates. They are the coordinates of the ditch itself. Danger close! Repeat, danger close! The radio operator on the offshore destroyer hesitates for a microsecond, then acknowledges. The captain drops the handset. Cover! He roars. Bury your heads! The rangers curl into fetal positions, pressing their helmets into the wet clay. They open their mouths to equalize the pressure. The sky tears open. The sound is not a whistle. It is the roar of a tearing sheet of metal the size of the horizon. 5-inch naval shells slam into the village center. The earth liquefies. The machine gun nest on the rooftop vanishes instantly. The building it stood upon ceases to exist, converted into a cloud of red brick dust and splintered wood. A shockwave expands outward at the speed of sound. It hits the irrigation ditch like a physical hammer. The ground bounces. Rangers are tossed into the air and slammed back down. Lungs empty, eyes vibrate in their sockets. Another salvo hits, then another. The shelling walks the street, pulverizing everything in the kill zone. The enemy assault force evaporates. Bodies, weapons, and walls are hurled hundreds of feet into the air, indistinguishable from one another. The heat is intense, scorching the hair on the rangers' exposed arms. A final shell strikes the fuel storage tank behind the market. A mushroom cloud of orange fire billows upward, sucking the oxygen from the air. Then, silence. It is a heavy, ringing silence. Dust hangs thick and still, obscuring the sun. A ranger coughs, spitting black grit. He pushes himself up. The village is gone. Only craters remain. 1100 hours, central volcanic peak, Orchid Island. The sun beats down on the exposed black rock, baking the basalt until it radiates heat. The air is thin and smells of sulfur, dried blood, and desperation. The 12 remaining rangers crouch behind a low wall of piled stones. Their uniforms are shredded, stained with mud and red clay. They check their magazines. They are light, almost empty. Below, the jungle canopy stirs. A sea of green uniforms emerges from the tree line, massing at the base of the slope. A whistle blows. It is a sharp, piercing sound that cuts through the wind. The enemy force surges upward. Hundreds of soldiers sprint up the steep incline, screaming a war cry. They scramble over loose scree, boots slipping, hands clawing at the jagged rocks. They move like a tide, unstoppable and vast. "Make them count," the captain rasps. His voice is wrecked from smoke. The rangers shoulder their weapons. They wait. The lead element crosses the 100-yard marker. The rangers open fire. It is not a barrage. It is a slow, rhythmic cadence. Bang, bang, bang. Each shot drops a target. Bodies tumble backward, knocking down the men behind them. The black rock becomes slicked with fresh blood. The enemy does not stop. They step over the fallen. They fire from the hip as they climb. Bullets chip away the rock wall, protecting the survivors. Stone fragments slice into cheeks and necks. A ranger stands to throw his last grenade. A burst of gunfire catches him in the chest. He falls back, the grenade tumbling from his hand. The captain kicks it over the wall. It explodes mid-air, showering the climbing attackers with steel. "Dry!" a soldier yells. He throws his empty rifle at the advancing horde. He draws his pistol. "Dry!" another screams. He pulls his entrenching tool from his belt, sharpening the spade edge against the rock. The wave hits the perimeter. The distance closes to zero. "Fix bayonets!" the captain roars. He draws a combat knife. The rangers stand up. They do not retreat. They vault over their own wall to meet the charge. The two forces collide with the sound of a car crash. Metal slams into metal, bodies impact with bone-breaking force. The captain drives his shoulder into a Marine, knocking him off the ledge. They tumble down the slope together, locked in a death grip. The peak is engulfed in a chaotic, swirling melee of knives, rocks, and fists. The sun glares down on the brawl, indifferent to the slaughter.